Here's a question from January 2013. It was a question 3 or 4, that's a 12 marker, so you need to spend 18 minutes on this question. The question is about how Jewish policy towards the Jews changed in the years 1938 to 45. So the question is, in what ways did the Nazi persecution of Jews change in the years 1938 to 45? Here's the overview of what the answer would look like. Remember, the key thing is to introduce the question, put it into context, and then the absolutely essential thing is to get those main points across that are on the left-hand side of the plan. How long you spend on each point depends on how fast you can write. As you can see, if you include in the conclusion and the introduction, so there's the conclusion at the end, so those are the essential points to put across. There are in total 6 paragraphs. It's 18 minutes. That works out on average 3 minutes per paragraph. So keep to that timing. Have a go after this podcast at writing an answer. 3 minutes per paragraph. You should be able to expand each point with some extra information. Okay, maybe not all the information to the left, to the right there, but certainly some. So what I'll do is I'll take you through what the key points were, make sure you understand them, and then give you the examples of the key supporting information to back up each point. Okay, so here we go. Zoom in. Let's look first of all at the introduction or analysing the question. Okay, so as always, what the introduction does is you really focus in on those dates. So crucial. Okay, so this is why in history you've really got to know your material, you've got to know the dates. The question is about the period 1938 to 45 and about how policy changed. Okay, so there's the key historical word, it's about change. Whenever you get a question about change, you should be using words like gradual change, rapid change, accelerated change, turning point. Talk about the types of change all the way through. That's what the examiners really like. Okay, so it's not describing, it's analysing. So what you're going to do in the introduction is to say focus on those dates. Point out that 1938. Why 1938? Because that was when Kristallnacht happened. Kristallnacht. That was the beginning of planned violence against the Jews. And from that point on, it steadily increased, it accelerated, it got worse and worse over the next 7 years, culminating in the planned mass murder, and the key word is genocide of the Jews. The other key word is the term historians use is the Holocaust, which was in the second half of World War II, 1942 to 45. Okay, so as you can see, that introduction is literally 3 short sentences. You could easily write that in 2 minutes. So a very brief introduction just to start your answer off. You then move into the main paragraphs. I'll just pull back a little bit. So as you can see, there are 4 key points that you want to put across in the main part of the answer. What you're basically doing is in paragraph 2, you're explaining what the situation was like at the start of 1938. In paragraph 3, so you move into paragraph 3, you're saying what happened in 1938 that changed it. And then in paragraphs 4 and 5, you're moving into how policy developed further in World War II. So you're following a timeline here. Okay, so let's start off with paragraph 2. So a very brief paragraph. Remember, the focus has got to be on the period 1938 to 45, how it changed. But to do that, you've got to say what was it like before 1938. And the key point you want to make is that although Jews were treated badly, on the whole, there was little organised violence against the Jews. The main policy before 1938 was to turn Jews into second-class citizens by separating them from non-Jews in Germany. So a couple of examples: they had to go to separate public areas like parks and swimming pools, but the main example was the Nuremberg Laws of 1935. It was September 1935, which took away their citizenship, and it forbade them to marry or have sex with non-Jewish Germans. So again, that paragraph could be put across very, very swiftly in 2 or 3 minutes, just to make those key points. You then move into paragraph 3, where you say what happened in 1938 was that policy became more extreme. There's the word extreme. Now the examiners really like that word there, radical. Radical basically means the same as extreme, but try to use that word radical. Policy became more radical, it became radicalised. What does that mean? It means that there was more organised violence, and as a result, the policy moved to one of forcing German Jews to leave Germany, and the word is emigration. They wanted the Jews to emigrate, to leave the country. Okay, so supporting that, obviously, Kristallnacht is the main point. 8th, 9th of November, get the date in. In one sentence, for this particular question, sum up what happened. The SA attacked Jewish businesses, they burned down their churches, synagogues, 91 Jews were killed, thousands in concentration camps, and 3 days later, the 12th of November, Jews were banned from owning businesses. And so from that point onwards, Jewish policy was taken over by the SS, and the official policy was emigration, to force Jews in their thousands to emigrate. So again, 3 minutes on that paragraph. Keep it really, really punchy, just knock those key points home, because what you now need to do is you now need to move into how it then changed further with World War II. Now again, most candidates here just jump straight into Auschwitz, the death camps. Very, very common, but that's a weak response. What you've got to do when you talk about Jewish policy in World War II is break it down into 2 phases. So paragraph 4, what you're doing is you're looking at the early years of World War II, 1939 to 41. And the point you want to make here is that emigration was no longer a solution. When you're at war, you can't force Jews across your frontiers because frontiers are closed. And so what happened was the number of Jews under Nazi control increased, and random violence increased to new high levels. Try to use words like intensified or accelerate to get that across. Why did the number of Jews increase? Well, because Germany, of course, invaded Poland in 1939 and invaded Russia in 1941. And when they did that, 3.5 million Polish Jews, 5 million Russian Jews were suddenly under Nazi control. So the problem got worse. The Nazis didn't know what to do about the problem, and in an atmosphere of war where violence was normal, the policy became one of concentrating Jews into ghettos, and that's the key point you need to make. Walled off sections of cities, the Nazis were not sure what to do with them, so they pushed them into ghettos. Historians have speculated possibly the Nazis were thinking when they won the war that they would move them all out to Siberia on the far side of the Soviet Union once the Soviet Union was defeated. Historians still argue about that. What we do know, though, is that the conditions in the ghetto were horrible. Thousands died. There was disease, but there was also a lot more random acts of violence. And we also know that when the Nazis invaded Russia in 1941, there were mass shootings in the hundreds of thousands behind the fighting lines of Russian Jews. So policy was definitely moving towards a much more violent solution. And then you move into the final paragraph, paragraph 5, and this is focusing on 1942 to 45. And this is the bit that everyone talks about. The decision was made for genocide. The final solution now moved to one of mass murder, planned mass murder. So there's again, you see that word there in the opening sentence, radical, most extreme decision for planned mass murder. Now, there is a key fact, okay, put that in, learn the date, January 1942, a conference in Berlin called the Wannsee Conference. That's when the decision was made to mass murder the Jews of Europe. And the method that was going to be used was gassing. Now again, depending on how much time you've got to write, it's a very nice distinction to make that in the early months they used what we call mobile gassing units. The example of a death camp that did that was Chelmno. Mobile gassing units was basically putting Jews into the backs of vans and gassing them with exhaust fumes through hose pipes. But it then moved to fixed gassing units, and the most famous example of that was Auschwitz, which could mass murder literally scores, thousands and thousands of Jews in one gassing, which is why 6 million, and there's obviously a key statistic, Jews had been murdered in the Holocaust by 1945. Okay, so as you can see, if you write punctually, if you write concisely, you can get a lot of information across in those 4 paragraphs, working on the basis of about 3 minutes per paragraph. Then pull back a little bit, bring it all together in your conclusion. So your final paragraph, pull it together. So the key thing is get that word radical in there as well. Policy became more extreme. 1938, I don't think I've actually written it in the conclusion there, but I'll write it down for you. 1938 was a turning point. And that's a lovely word. Historians love it, the examiners love it. That was the sort of point where violence moved towards being more extreme. It moved towards a much more violent solution. Up to 1938, there was violence towards Jews, but it was on the whole random. On the whole, persecution was legal separation before 1938. But with Kristallnacht, from that point on, it became much more organised violence as opposed to random violence. That started with Kristallnacht, and it moved towards the final phase, which was, of course, mass murder through the Holocaust in the second half of World War II. 18-minute answer. It is a small essay, basically. Best advice now is have a go at writing an answer to that question yourself. Hope that was useful for you.